In the significant biological special programs, SPS for short, there are tissue types that have developed from the middle and outer germ layers. The bone therefore has two different conflict types with two SPS that run differently. Today it's about the bone itself. We will do the periosteum another time. The SBS is controlled by the cerebral medulla. DHS-Dukhamar syndrome is a self-devaluation conflict. A severe SDC affects the bones. A milder one, for example, affects the lymph nodes. Each bone has a specific conflict content. The cervical spine, for example, about injustice, or the knee, the sportal-related SDC. Leukemia occurs in the healing phase, which involves a bone that also has blood-forming functions. First of all, something about the theory. As with all SBS, the conflict occurs completely synchronously on the three levels of psyche, brain, and organ. The DHS begins the conflict-active phase. In the psyche, the person affected has obsessive thoughts about their conflict. For example, he is humiliated because he couldn't do something. In the brain, you can see the active Hama focus in the cerebral medulla. This ensures that the bone is broken down organically where the SDC was felt. The bone develops holes according to the conflict activity. This is painless because the bone itself has no pain receptors. If a blood-forming bone is affected, blood production is also impaired. Is the SDC resolved, the affected person enters the healing phase. He is now mentally free. The mental yoke has been lifted, the obsessive thinking is over. He has overcome the humiliation. In the first part of the healing phase, in the brain, fluid and connective tissue build up occurs in Hama focus. This can be noticeable as a headache. Organically, the bone holes are rebuilt with swelling and deposition of liquid bone cells. The swelling causes the pain-sensitive periosteum to stretch. The affected person now experiences bone pain. The periosteum acts like a bandage that holds the bone together. Due to the healing swelling and expansion, the bone is unstable and the risk of a fracture is particularly high in this phase. The pain forces the individual to keep the affected area still. In a crisis, the liquid is squeezed out in the Hama focus. The crisis is organically, as always, a reinforced repetition of the conflict-active phase, i.e. pain-free again. In the second part of the healing phase, the Hama focus is repaired with the connective tissue cells. The bone cells solidify organically, and in the end, the affected area of the bone is thicker and stronger than before. Dr. Hama calls the cerebral medulla SBS the luxury group because Mother Nature allows herself the luxury of weakening for the entire duration of the SBS in order to achieve a strengthening, a biological advantage at the end. The bone is thicker, the tendon is stronger, etc. This is also the biological meaning of the SBS. To better understand leukemia, I will first say something about the blood test values. Blood is made up of solid and liquid components. The blood test values are the resulting ratio values. When a blood sample is taken, the number of solid blood components in a certain amount of blood fluid is determined, not the actual total value. However, the blood fluid is variable, as we know from the law of biphasic. In the sympathicotonic conflict-active phase, the blood contains less fluid than in the vagotonic healing phase. You can see this clearly in the vessels of the hands. When you are stressed, they are cramped and cold. If you are in vagotonia, they are wide and warm. This variability naturally has an impact on the blood values and thus on the diagnosis. A simple example to illustrate. There are 4 red blood cells in a circulatory system with 6 liters of blood fluid, which makes a ratio of 4:6 or 0.66. If you take out a liter of liquid, you get a value of 4:5, i.e. 0.8. However, if you add a liter of liquid, you get a ratio of 4:7, so 0.57. The value of red blood cells increased in the first case and fell in the last case, but in fact there were always 4 available. If the individual is in the active phase of a SDC that has spread to the bone and this bone contributes to blood formation, blood production is also impaired. For example, fewer red and white blood cells are produced. To illustrate, I'll use the example above again. There are now only 2 red blood cells left. However, since the individual is in the sympathetic conflict-active phase, there's also less blood fluid in the circulatory system, say 5 liters. The value 2 to 5, i.e. 0.4, is then in the lower range, but still within limits. In relation of the red blood cells, one would speak of anemia. Once the individual resolves the SDC, they enter the vagotonic healing phase. Due to the vagotonia and the resulting more fluid in the blood, let's assume 7 liters, you get a completely different ratio. The value fell from 0.4 to 2 to 7, 0.28. However, the erythrocyte count remained the same. They are still 2. Furthermore, blood production changes. At the beginning of the healing phase, for example, masses of leukocytes and their precursor cells are produced, which together with the vagotonia results in the blood picture of leukemia. At the end of the SBS, blood production returned to normal. A side note, there are also lymph nodes that are involved in blood formation. The SBS work in the same way as with bone. This is not referred to as bone leukemia, but as lymphatic leukemia. Yeah, that's my layman's explanation. If you want to know more, you need to consult Dr. Hamer's literature, which deals with. You should anyways, if you want to understand your body. Now to Guido Westerwelle. Guido Westerwelle was born on December 27, 1961. He was a founding member of the Young Liberals in 1983 and its chairman until 1988. From 1994 to 2001, he was General Secretary of the FDP, and in 2001, at just 39 years old, he became the party's youngest federal chairman to date. In 2009, Guido Westerwelle, as FDP party leader, achieved the Liberals' best result ever in a federal election with 14.6%. It was a historic election success for the FDP. Westerwelle was then even appointed Federal Foreign Minister and Vice Chancellor. In June 2014, he was diagnosed with leukemia during a blood test for meniscus surgery. Westerwelle quickly receives chemotherapy and radiation. In September 2014, he received a stem cell transplant. He commented on his treatment in a Spiegel interview on November 7, 2015. "My mouth is sore at the moment. This is really horrible when it comes to eating. It feels like you have barbed wire in your mouth. And it was after chemo and I was incredibly weak. These aren't weak pills that you get there. You are essentially rendered unfit for life in order to survive." Guido Westerwelle died on March 18, 2016 at the age of 54. Guido Westerwelle must have suffered and resolved a self-devaluation conflict, otherwise he would not have gotten leukemia. Take a look at these sequences about Westerwelles self-esteem and self-image.
Auf jedem Schiff, das dampft und segelt, gibt's einen, der die Sache regelt, und das bin ich. Hier steht die Freiheitsstatue dieser Republik. Oder um es auf Deutsch zu sagen, ihr kauft mir den Schneid nicht ab. Das verspreche ich euch.
Has Westerwelle been knocked off his pedestal? Did someone take him down from his high horse? That's right. He himself in his legislative period 2009 to 2013. For the first time, he shot himself in the foot with his comments about Hartz IV recipients. His promised and widely announced tax reform fell through. The FDP recorded massive losses in the state elections, though that he had to give up his chairmanship in 2011. The euro crisis followed, and in 2013 the FDP failed at the 5% hurdle in the federal election. Westerwelle was no longer even invited by ARD television to the Berlin round of the 2013 election. Westerwelle quietly resigned from parliament in October 2013. To make it short, after his rapid political rise, Westerwelle became a political nobody, from vice-chancellor and foreign minister. His career was ended. I suspect that he suffered a self-devaluation conflict during this time. How did Westerwelle react after his fall from grace? According to his own statements in the Günther Jauch broadcast on November 8, 2015, he was, quotation marks, in great shape and, quotation marks, had made a lot of plans and, quotation mark, I was really full of energy. With enthusiasm, he founded the Westerwelle Foundation in December 2013, a foundation for international understanding which he set up from January 2014. The opening ceremony took place on June 5, 2014, shortly before the diagnosis of leukemia on June 17. Westerwelle was someone again. I think this leads to the resolution of the SCC, and probably he was caught at the beginning of the healing phase. Rest in peace, Guido Westerwelle.